Hello and good morning. It is 7 a.m. A sexual predator with a history of violence was left free to stalk and kill a law graduate because of failings by probation officers. Jordan McSweeney had been released from prison 9 days earlier but was not classified as a high-risk offender. That mistake meant no urgent action was taken when he broke the terms of his licence, and it cost Zara Aleena her life. Coming up, we'll ask the Police and Crime Minister, Chris Philp, what the government is doing to stop it from happening again. It is Tuesday, the 24th of January. An official report reveals the litany of errors and missed opportunities by probation officers that cost Zara Aleena her life. Whitehall's standards watchdog warns strong ethical values must be woven into every aspect of government, while the Prime Minister resists calls to sack Nadhim Zahawi over his tax affairs. Also ahead, 7 people are killed in the second mass shooting in California in just 3 days. This is the moment a man wrestles the gun from the Monterey Park shooter, preventing more carnage.
I had the belief that I was going to die, like my life was ending here at that very moment. But something amazing happened, a miracle actually.
Chinese cities report some of their coldest temperatures since records began. Minus 53 degrees was recorded in Mohe. We'll hear what it's like to look back at the Earth from space with the former NASA astronaut Bruce Melnick. And the wildlife filmmaker Gordon Buchanan will be here to talk us through some of his favourite encounters with creatures, both great and small. Hello and thank you for being with us. The Chief Inspector of Probation has outlined a litany of errors that left a sexual predator free to commit murder when he should have been locked up. Jordan McSweeney stalked and killed the law graduate Zara Aleena just 9 days after being released from prison. He had a history of violence and had broken the terms of his licence, but was wrongly assessed by probation staff as not being a high risk. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt has our top story.
On the prowl, only a week after being freed from prison, but Jordan McSweeney had already broken the rules of his release and should have been back in jail. Probation service blunders left him free to roam the streets looking for a victim. He chose law graduate Zara Aleena. In a terrifying and ruthless attack, McSweeney sexually assaulted her, then kicked her to death.
The probation service should have assessed Jordan McSweeney as being a high risk of serious harm to the public. Had they done so, the way that his release from prison was planned and the controls that were put around him would have been far tougher and more robust, and there would have been more opportunities to bring him back to prison.
Within days of his release, McSweeney had missed probation meetings. He was recalled to prison, but not quickly enough. The paperwork was delayed, then police couldn't find him.
According to the report, McSweeney's previous convictions, his recent crimes and his violence in prison were all viewed in isolation. Nobody joined the dots. If they had, they would have realised he was at high risk of reoffending.
Police finally did catch up with McSweeney the day after he murdered Zara. Last week, it emerged that Damien Bendel was another violent criminal poorly managed by the probation service. He went on to kill 3 children and his pregnant partner. In a statement, Prisons and Probation Minister Damien Hine said, "We are taking immediate steps to address the serious issues raised by the Jordan McSweeney and Damien Bendel cases. This includes mandatory training to improve risk assessments, implementing new processes to guarantee the swift recall of offenders, and we have taken disciplinary action where appropriate." The Probation Officers Union blamed the failings on earlier privatisation of their service and current staff shortages. It urged the Justice Secretary to boost investment. Martin Brunt, Sky News.
Now, it's 7:20 this morning. We'll be speaking to the Crime and Policing Minister, Chris Philp, about that report, so make sure you stay with us for that. Now, the standards watchdog in Whitehall has warned that strong ethical values must be woven into every aspect of the way government bodies operate. A report from the Committee on Standards in Public Life said that people should be safe to pick up potential issues before they escalate. Now, the committee chairman, Lord Evans of Weardale, said, "We heard that zero tolerance of behaviour that does not align with the values of the organisation is essential for embedding good practice. Leaders must be clear that there is a fine line which, when crossed, results in consequences." Now, the Labour Party Deputy Leader Angela Rayner said that the findings should be a mark of shame for the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. She's calling on him to sack his party chairman Nadhim Zahawi over his tax affairs. Mr Sunak said yesterday there were questions that needed answering and has ordered an investigation. A government spokesman said that the government takes propriety and ethics in public life very seriously. Now, later on, we'll be speaking to the former head of the civil service, that's Lord Kerslake, about that report. That's in around half an hour's time. Well, the controversy surrounding the former Chancellor is still making many of the front pages. This is the Metro's front page, which focuses on the PM ordering that investigation into Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs with the headline, "Rishi Dish the Dirt." The story is also on the front of the Financial Times. Their headline reads, "Zahawi fights for political life over tax scandal as Sunak orders ethics review." The Eye says that Zahawi faces sack as PM demands answers. Daily Express has a different lead this morning. It has the story of a triple murderer tricking his way into Britain by posing as a child asylum seeker. And that story is also the front page lead for the Daily Telegraph. Now, 7 people have been killed in a second mass shooting in California in just 3 days. 11 people were killed in the earlier shooting on Saturday during a Chinese New Year event. And new pictures are showing the moment a man wrestled the weapon from the gunman. Brandon Say says he acted on instinct. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner has this.
This is the moment a 24-year-old Brandon Shea wrestles a gun from the man wearing the beanie hat. He had already shot dead 11 people at a dance studio 10 minutes away. An astonishing act of bravery stopping him from continuing his killing spree at this second venue.
There was a moment I actually froze up because I had the belief that I was going to die. Like, my life was ending here at that very moment. But something amazing happened, a miracle actually. He started to try to prep his weapon so he could shoot everybody. But then it dawned on me that this was the moment to disarm him. I could do something here that could protect everybody, and then quickly aimed the gun at him and shouted, "Go away, I'm gonna shoot. Get out here, go."
Outside the dance studio where the massacre took place, a moment of reflection. This predominantly Asian community is experiencing the most American of tragedies. For many, this dance floor was an extended family, those killed in their 50s, 60s and 70s. The first victim was identified as 65-year-old Mai Nan. Jenny and Selena have been coming here for years. Their best friend was shot dead inside.
I think maybe he's in the middle of the dancing, and then and then he was happened to be in front of the door. I think that's what it is, because he passed away right there. I cannot even describe how nice he is.
How difficult have the last few days been for you, knowing what's happened here?
Very difficult. I try myself not to think about it, but if I think about it, I become very emotional.
72-year-old Hu Can Tran fired 42 rounds. Officers are investigating whether some victims were targeted as part of a domestic dispute. And less than 48 hours later, another mass shooting in California. 400 miles up the coast, 7 people shot dead on farmland. 67-year-old Zhao Chun-li handed himself into police. It is a never-ending cycle of gun violence in America. The grieving continues. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Monterey Park.
Now, the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg is meeting with the German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius. Germany is facing calls from its NATO allies to donate tanks to Ukraine to help them resist Russia's invasion. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, is joining us now from Berlin. Siobhan, good morning to you. Nice to have you with us. So, look, the pressure keeps building on Berlin to try and donate tanks to Ukraine. What are we expecting out of this meeting?
Well, as you say, that ongoing question of will the Germans free the Leopard tanks or not continues today. And in the next few hours, it's going to be focused here on the German Defence Ministry, because it's here that the NATO chief will meet the German Defence Minister. And there's no doubt they're going to be discussing, will Germany be sending any of its Leopard 2 tanks, and will it be allowing allies to send theirs? Now, there did seem to be a little bit of movement about this over the weekend when the German Foreign Minister suggested that if Poland asked to send its tanks, that Germany wouldn't stand in the way. But interestingly, yesterday, when she was in Brussels, she seemed to step back a little bit from that comment and just said, when she was asked by reporters again on that they would work in conjunction with allies. So we're kind of in that holding pattern again. And I spoke to the government spokesperson about this yesterday and said, what's going on? What kind of timeframes are we working for? Will you be giving permission? And what he said was that they need to take this really seriously. They're obviously looking at how they can continue to support Ukraine. And it's important to remember that outside the US, Germany is one of the biggest financial supporters of Ukraine, both in terms of military and other humanitarian support. So they'll be looking at how they can support Ukraine. But at the same time, he said that they need to balance their own domestic agenda and the protection of Germany, as well as the protection of NATO as well. So there'll be those kinds of discussions going on behind the scenes. When I asked him, though, about time frame, he couldn't really put a time on that. He said, obviously, they'd move as quickly as possible, but they'd also need to be looking at this in depth. And this would have to go before some sort of meeting of the inner cabinet here at the German government as well. So the pressure continues. We know, though, Poland has said if it doesn't get the go-ahead, it may make a coalition and send its tanks anyway.
OK, Siobhan, for now, thank you for that. Well, let's take a look at some of today's other headlines now. And the Church of England is calling for a radical redesign of social care in Britain. The Archbishops of Canterbury and York have proposed a national care covenant, which asks governments to commit new funding for social care and provide more supports to unpaid carers. The government says it's made up to £7.5 billion available over the next 2 years to support services. The Commons Women and Equalities Committee says that the government has missed an opportunity by rejecting its proposal to trial menopausal leave for women. In its response, the government said such a move could turn out to be counterproductive. Well, the committee chair, Caroline Noakes, is urging ministers to reconsider. And to the Crown Estate, which manages the King's property portfolio, has launched court proceedings against Twitter. It's accused the social media firm of failing to pay rent on its London headquarters, which have been deserted since mass layoffs began under Elon Musk's last year. Well, temperatures are still below freezing in many parts of the country, and the National Grid has decided to extend its emergency plan to pay households to use less power for a second day. Matthew Thompson joins us now for more on this. Matthew, good to have you with us. So it first ran last night. It's running again tonight, this idea of paying people to use less energy, but it's been expanded a bit.
It has been expanded, just like yesterday. Only the second time this has ever been done, the National Grid paying customers to use less energy than they otherwise would. But unlike yesterday, it's running for about an hour and a half. So between 4:30 and 6 o'clock this evening. Yesterday, it only ran for an hour. But like yesterday, around 1 million households, so only those with an a smart meter and signed up to the 26 or so energy companies which are participating, will be paid to use less energy than they otherwise would. Now, we're not talking vast fortunes. Depending on your supplier, it's about £3 to £6 per unit of electricity. A bit of context, boiling a kettle, for example, only uses about 1/4 of a unit. So if you didn't boil your kettle, you might really only earn a few pence. But if you would usually run your tumble dryer for an hour, well, not doing that might net you something like £8, depending, again, on the supplier. So we're not talking vast fortunes, but every little helps. And the National Grid very keen to point out, as they did yesterday, that the fact they're running this scheme does not mean that the lights are at risk of going out. Really, it's more because the system is designed so that no more electricity is being taken out than is being put in at any given moment. Normally what the grid might do is increase supply to tackle that, but this is just another way of doing it by trying to push down on demand. So once again, it's not that the lights are going to go out. This is just another way of the National Grid ensuring that there is enough spare capacity in the system to ensure continuity of supply. But what they have done, as they did yesterday, is they've instructed 3 coal-fired power units, 2 in Drax in North Yorkshire and 1 in Nottinghamshire, to warm up just in case they are needed, given the bracing cold temperatures, given that wind is not generating as much as it should, in case they're needed to step in and start generating supply.
OK, Matthew, for now, appreciate that. Thank you. As coal-fired stations are back on standby as households in the UK have been using more power because of the cold. But even last night's low of -8 in some parts of southern England is positively balmy compared to what it's been in China. Let's bring in our meteorologist, Joanna Robinson, who's joining us now. Joanna, a little bit warmer when I got up this morning, headed in at around 3. How's it looking for the next few days?
Yes, well, it's a cold start for a few of us in the south, not quite as cold in the southeast, but you just mentioned there, China, -53 degrees Celsius. That's the lowest recorded temperature in modern Chinese history, so very low temperatures there. Further south across China, opposite conditions. We're seeing, much higher temperatures there, so a spread across China of 86 degrees Celsius. So that's a huge spread in temperatures for the country there. But yes, we talked about in the UK, very cold. It's currently -8 degrees Celsius just down the road from me in Oxfordshire. So a cold start to the day, and it will stay cold for the next few days in the south. And we mentioned earlier about the wind. Yes, the lack of wind that we've got at the moment, but we will see a change, I think, next week with more changeable conditions and strengthening winds. But let's take a look at the forecast. So, like I said, it's a very cold start in parts of the south this morning, an area really from Yorkshire, Lincolnshire down into the southwest of the country, seeing freezing conditions, some fog as well, some dense fog across the east of Wales and into the West Midlands this morning, which could bring some travel disruption this morning. But elsewhere, milder start, double figures in the far north. The fog will lift to bring some sunshine in the south, murky with some patchy rain further north.
Well, still to come on the programme this morning, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Labour's David Lammy, will join us just after 8. And with the SNP calling on the Prime Minister to sack Nadhim Zahawi over his tax affairs, we'll be speaking to the party's leader in Westminster, Stephen Flynn. Well, for the government position on this, I'm joined by the Crime and Policing and Fire Minister, Chris Philp. Chris Philp, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us in the studio. We're going to come to your brief, of course, later on in the interview, but I need to start with Nadhim Zahawi and the situation surrounding him. Did Nadhim Zahawi mislead Rishi Sunak?
Well, I don't know exactly what was said between the two of them. What I do know is that the Prime Minister has said there are serious questions to answer. He said that yesterday, and as a result of that, he's appointed the independent advisor on ethics to look into this properly, to get to the bottom of it, so the public can understand exactly what's going on, and the Prime Minister can then respond appropriately. So I think the Prime Minister's acted quickly, he's acted decisively. He is completely committed, as he said publicly, to maintaining ethics and high standards in public life. And his actions here, by appointing the independent ethics advisor and then initiating this investigation so quickly, demonstrates that these aren't just words by the Prime Minister, he is acting accordingly as well. So what's changed from last week at Prime Minister's questions when he said that he took Nadhim Zahawi at his word? Well, I think there have been some more information came out over the weekend. Some of that was put into the public domain by Nadhim Zahawi himself. I think as a result of that information, the Prime Minister has concluded there are questions that need to be answered. They need to be investigated properly, and that's why he's got the independent advisor on ethics to initiate this investigation. That's the right thing to do. So the Prime Minister didn't know about the investigation into Nadhim Zahawi when he appointed him as
as chairman?
My understanding is that when the Prime Minister appointed Nadhim Zahawi, his understanding was there were no outstanding tax issues at that time, and I don't think. My understanding is that he wasn't aware of the discussions that had taken place previously. Clearly, over the weekend, further things were disclosed publicly, which has led the Prime Minister to appoint the independent ethics advisor to investigate, and that is exactly the right thing to do. It shows that the Prime Minister is acting exactly as he said he would to maintain ethics and standards in public life.
Was he aware of the penalty that had been levied against Mr Zahawi?
I don't believe so. But as I say, what we need to do is get these facts fully investigated, properly, thoroughly, because you and I don't know, frankly, exactly what happened, because people's tax affairs are rightly private.
Completely right. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why it's really appropriate that the independent ethics advisor properly looks into this, because you and I would be speculating otherwise.
But when Rishi Sunak comes into office promising accountability, integrity and professionalism, with this latest scandal, with the situation around Boris Johnson and Richard Sharp, with the sacking of Gavin Williamson, with the Deputy Prime Minister under investigation, I mean, which part of those three words are actually being lived up to by this government?
Well, I think, actually, in the way you've described that, you've sort of answered your own question, because, Gavin Williamson is no longer a minister in government. Where accusations were made against Dominic Raab in relation to bullying and in relation to Nadhim Zahawi about tax, Rishi Sunak, as Prime Minister, has acted quickly and decisively to set up an independent investigation. So he's done exactly what you would expect somebody to do who is committed to maintaining high standards in public life. And I think your sort of question acknowledged that, right? He's done what you would want him to do.
OK, let's move on to some of the other news for this morning. And we've seen that a review is going to be held into the probation service after two men, Jordan McSweeney and another killer, were allowed out when they shouldn't have been. What's going on in the probation service?
Well, I mean, the case of Zara Aleena's murder is absolutely shocking. And the report yesterday shows there were failings in the probation service. He was out on licence. He'd been released from prison, having committed, I think, a number of offences, including burglary. He then breached his licence conditions by, for example, failing to attend meetings. He should have been recalled back into prison, but he wasn't. So the probation service have fully accepted the recommendations made by the inspector. They're changing the way that they conduct their risk assessments. They're taking into account a wider range of circumstances. I think one of the individuals in the probation service responsible for the decision-making is now subject to disciplinary proceedings. In addition to that, we're putting more resources into the probation service. So 2,500 extra probation officers have been hired. £155 million extra per year is being put into it to make sure these things don't happen again. The probation service manage, I think, over 200,000 offenders. It's a very large number. Cases like this are thankfully extremely rare, but when they do happen, they are absolutely heartbreaking. The case is just heartbreaking.
Absolutely, because these guys should not have been out. There's no way they should have been on our streets. So how can the public be confident that there aren't more people like this out there right now?
Well, as I say, these cases are thankfully extremely, extremely rare, but when they happen, they are truly, truly heartbreaking. That's why all of the recommendations made by the inspector are being adopted, and that is why the disciplinary action is being taken. That's why the risk assessment processes are being widened. It's why the extra people have been hired, 2,500. It's why the extra money is being put in, because we do need to make sure that the public are kept safe and this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
So extra money going in, extra officers being put forward. Let's talk,
better and wider processes as well.
Let's talk about your brief and the announcement this morning about some new plans for policing. Part of it was announced because of the shooting of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. You want to try and crack down on criminal gangs, but just at Christmas Eve, another person was shot in Liverpool. So is enough being done in cities like that where there are high crime rates to try and make sure that these kind of crimes don't occur?
Well, the rollout of the Clear, Hold, Build strategy nationwide is designed to address these organised crime gangs who blight people's lives. We have seen successful pilot work going on in parts of the country. For example, in West Yorkshire, we saw, when this programme was piloted, a 57% reduction in burglary, a 27% reduction in drug offences. And actually on Merseyside, where it was piloted as well, we saw 420 arrests, 11 firearm seizures and 90 vehicle seizures. So we're now going to roll this out across the country. It is supported, of course, by all the extra police officers we're in the process now of hiring. We're going to hit I hope we're going to hit our 20,000 target by March of this year.
Right.
And if we hit that, and I think we will, then we'll have more police officers here in the country than we have ever had at any point in the UK's history. And those extra officers, of course, will be partly deployed against this threat, this organised criminal gang threat. We've seen this new model, clear, hold, build, working in the pilot areas. We're now going to apply it across the country to keep our streets safe. These criminal gangs ruthlessly target vulnerable people. They're dealing drugs. They're very often committing violent offences against each other and against the public. And that's why we need to clamp down on them and put them where they belong, which is in prison.
Yeah, and I know you're short of time. A couple more questions for you, if we can, please. You will have seen the reports over the weekend and yesterday in the paper about a number of children going missing from Home Office-run hotels in the south of England. What's the government doing to find those missing children?
Yeah, so I spoke to my colleague, the Immigration Minister, about this last night in preparation for this kind of conversation. So they are overwhelmingly 16 and 17 years old. When you say child, you sort of imagine a 5-year-old, but they're mostly 16 and 17.
But you're not trying to diminish the fact that they've gone missing. They're not care.
They're not. And by the way, some of them are age disputed, meaning they're probably over 18. They're not detained, to be clear. We're not detaining them. They are free to come and go. And in each case where someone has gone missing or absconded, all of the usual processes are followed, as they would if any other under 18 person goes missing with the police and with the local authority. So those processes have happened already as a matter of routine in each case. There are also on these sites, nurses, there are social workers present to make sure they do get the support
but there are concerns
that
that some of these children have been trafficked, Mr. Phil.
Yeah, so I asked the Immigration Minister this question last night, and he is not aware of any evidence anyone has been kidnapped or anything like that. If anyone does have that evidence, I would urge them to urgently contact the police or contact Crime Stoppers. But my colleague, the Immigration Minister, isn't aware of any such evidence. But if anyone has it, they should urgently come forward, as I say.
Well, I'm sure that those who have it will come forward if they do have it. Mr. Phil, really love to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much for being with us. All right, now, in some other news this morning, I just want to bring you some breaking news that came in the last couple of minutes while speaking to the Minister there. Public sector borrowing in December was £27.4 billion. That's the highest December figure since monthly records began back in January of 1993, largely because of a sharp rise in spending on energy support schemes and an increase in debt interest. Now, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, said that right now we're helping millions of families with the cost of living, but we must also ensure that our level of debt is fair for future generations. He goes on to say we've already taken some tough decisions to get debt falling, and it's vital that we stick to this plan so we can halve inflation this year and get growth going again, creating better paid jobs across the country. Now, we're going to speak to Poland's foreign ministry soon, as it and other Western allies continue to put pressure on Germany to allow main battle tanks to be sent to the war in Ukraine.
Patients waiting several hours in ambulances and hospital corridors.
Never, ever seen anything like this before.
The NHS is under huge pressure.
They have declared a critical incident.
Every bed in every bay is full.
They don't deserve to be treated like this.
Patients should be able to rely on a basic level of care.
There's not a minimum level of service any day because they've broken the NHS.
Looking increasingly difficult to heal.
They can't just keep letting this happen.
Can the NHS survive? Join the debate on Sky News.
Hello there and welcome back. Our top stories this morning. The probation watchdog has said that a series of failings left a sexual predator able to stalk and kill the law graduate Zara Aleena just days after he was released from jail. The Prime Minister has ordered an inquiry into Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs but is resisting pressure to sack him as party chairman. And 7 people have been killed in a mass shooting in California, the second in the state in just 3 days. Well, the policing minister has told the programme that the Prime Minister acted quickly and decisively to uphold standards in public life when he ordered an inquiry into the Conservative Party chairman Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs. Chris Philp said it was his understanding that Rishi Sunak wasn't aware of any outstanding issues with Mr Zahawi's taxes when he appointed him as Conservative Party chairman. And he said he does not believe that the Prime Minister was aware of any penalty levelled against Mr Zahawi by HMRC.
My understanding is that when the Prime Minister appointed Nadhim Zahawi, his understanding was there were no outstanding tax issues at that time. And I don't think, my understanding is that he wasn't aware of the discussions that had taken place previously. Clearly, over the weekend, further things were disclosed publicly, which has led the Prime Minister to appoint the independent ethics advisor to investigate, and that is exactly the right thing to do. It shows that the Prime Minister is acting exactly as he said he would to maintain ethics and standards in public life.
Well, our political correspondent Ali Fortescue joins us, and we've also got the crossbench peer and former head of the Civil Service, Lord Kerslake, as well, for his perspective on what's been happening. Ali, first to you. I mean, you heard the Minister there saying he wasn't aware of any misleading statements that have been made by Mrs Zahawi towards the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely still questions for Nadhim Zahawi, still questions for the Prime Minister too. Did Nadhim Zahawi mislead the Prime Minister? Because, as you were saying, you know, we've seen a shift in tone from Prime Minister's questions last week. Now the PM saying there's going to be this inquiry, that the ethics advisor, Laurie Magnus, is going to be looking into this. We heard Chris Philp this morning. He said, my understanding is that he wasn't, the Prime Minister, aware of discussions that had taken place previously. I mean, that's pretty vague. I think the problem for Rishi Sunak is a lot of this does land at Boris Johnson's doorstep. We know, of course, the issue with the BBC chairman as well. That's when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Nadhim Zahawi was made Chancellor under Boris Johnson. But we still have Dominic Raab being looked at. We had Gavin Williamson being sacked. We've got Suella Braverman back in Cabinet. Now Nadhim Zahawi being looked at as well. What Labour are saying is that these are the same old faces, the same old sleaze. And the problem, I think, for Rishi Sunak as well, is that even if this does blow over, it adds to the sense that is this a party that is out of touch with the public, where we are talking about potentially £1 million penalty, millions of pounds being paid back to HMRC, being seen as a minor misstep. Rishi Sunak needs to show that he can connect with the public. He's a millionaire, his wife's a billionaire. A problem for him is showing that he is in touch.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. And just before I come to you, Lord Kerslake, I do want to bring our viewers. We've had cameras outside Nadhim Zahawi's house for the past couple of days, and managed to film him on his way out this morning. He didn't say anything, but take a look. And if you are sensitive to flash photography, just a warning that there is some flash photography in this next clip.
You're going to resign, Mrs Zahawi? Do you feel under pressure to resign, sir?
Well, there he is, and Nadhim Zahawi being speeded away. Ali, I mean, we probably didn't expect him to say anything as if he is going to resign. But, the question will be for him and for the party, he's becoming a bit of a distraction, isn't it?
Yeah, it is becoming a bit of distraction. I mean, yeah, we're used to seeing MPs going into cars. I think the problem is it feels slightly familiar to where we were under Boris Johnson, where you had ministers coming out wanting to talk about their brief, but instead having to defend other ministers, and images like that of people getting in cars in trouble. That's something that Rishi Sunak said he wanted to move away from. He was all about integrity. So I think he needs to show that that's actually happening.
Yeah, and there's some real questions I did want to put to Chris Philp, but we had to speak about Nadhim Zahawi. Lord Kerslake, good morning to you. Let me bring you in now as well. I mean, your reaction, you will have seen what Chris Philp said to me this morning. There are still some questions to be answered, would you say?
Most definitely. I think Nadhim Zahawi is in a pretty perilous position at the moment. I think there are three big issues, each one of which would justify his resignation. Firstly, timing. How did it take so long to sort this issue, and was it right for it to be sorted when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer? Secondly, his honesty to the Prime Minister. It's pretty clear from your interview with Chris Phipps that the Prime Minister wasn't given the full story. That alone would be an issue for me. And then thirdly, honesty with the public. When this story first emerged back in July, he denied there was any issue here at all and said it was a smear. So there's quite a lot of questions to be answered here. And as I say, I think his position is pretty perilous.
And all of those things that you lay out there, they would be against the rules of ethics that are laid down by standards, right?
Oh, completely. I mean, you would expect complete transparency with the Prime Minister. How can you trust a minister if they're not giving you the full story about their own situation? I think most reasonable people would say sorting out your tax affairs when you're in charge of the service that collects our taxes is not a good look. And thirdly, we do now expect politicians and others really, to be very, very honest and not deny something is happening when it transparently is.
Yeah, and I suppose in the past few years we've lost some of that, unfortunately. I mean, an investigation has been called for. What does that do for the government? Because, I mean, of course we want to have it fully cleared up, but also gives a bit of time and space, doesn't it? But allows it to linger.
Well, I think the role of Sir Laurie Magnus, the ethics advisor, is exactly to look at situations like this. And so in that sense, it's the right thing to do. I guess the question is, how long is this going to take, this inquiry? Because whilst it's going on, you've got a minister, you've got the chairman of the Conservative Party with their position under question. And that's not good either. So you might ask, would it have been better to have said, look, there's an issue here, let's cut to the chase and ask him to resign. But I think it's a reasonable step if he genuinely thinks there are questions still that haven't been properly answered and he wants to get to the bottom of it. If that's what's going on, fair enough. But there's a price to be paid because the story carries on. We're talking about it now.
When you say if as well, I think Ali might have a question for you.
Right.
Well, I'm interested to ask you about Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, because he's come under some fire in the papers the last couple of days. He seems to be the kind of constant thread, the person that's been there throughout Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, now Rishi Sunak. Do you think he has questions to answer? Has he been tough enough?
I certainly think the role of the civil service, how much they knew, has got to be part of the inquiry. I'm reluctant to form a view on it for obvious reasons, partly because I used to work with Simon, so I have a party pre at some sense, but also I think we do need to know the facts. He's not in a position to speak out now and defend what he did or didn't do. So let's see what that inquiry brings.
Interesting.
And Lord Kerslake, we've had today a report from the Committee on Standards in Public Life saying that people in the civil service should feel safe to pick up potential issues. I mean, do you think there needs to be a rethink of the way the civil service works with government after, as Ali laid out, we've seen scandal after scandal for the past couple of years?
I think there is a change needed, and I think a number of people are saying this now. There needs to be more protection for civil servants who feel things aren't being done properly. I mean, trust in government is absolutely vital. And it's particularly vital when we're asking the public to do some tough things, as we did during COVID, as we are now, in terms of having to pay higher taxes and bear the issues around cost of living. So you've got to trust the government are acting in your best interests. And I think that means you've got to have very, very high standards.
Yeah, and I do want to go on, Ali.
Yeah, how would you do that? How would you rebalance that relationship?
Well, I think it's about being confident that civil servants can have a channel to raise issues and that they won't be put in any position of risk in their jobs if they do raise issues. That's got to be the way forward here. And but in the end, I would say, unless the Prime Minister fundamentally believes in the importance of this, then I think no amount of changes to the rules will ultimately change it. I think, if we're really honest, Boris Johnson had a loose attachment to some of this. I hope Rishi Sunak is different. We'll see when he deals with these current inquiries.
And I suppose we could also, as well, in the next couple of years, see a change of government. Would you like to see any incoming government make promises, like you're saying, to try and reform the relationship?
Yes, I would. And I think a conversation should happen as part of preparing for government if Labour wins, to say, well, what would you do to improve integrity here? What changes do you want to make to be absolutely sure we're above and beyond reproach on this?
And just a final thought for you, Lord Kerslake. I understand that Sir Keir Starmer's looking for a new Chief of Staff. Have you ever considered getting back into it?
Well, it's a really interesting job. I think, personally, I'm too old for that role.
Oh, don't be silly.
It needs someone younger and
You've got the expertise.
Work all hours. Well, potentially, yes, but I think it needs someone who can work all hours God sends, and that probably isn't me at the moment.
Probably, but you didn't say no. All right, Lord Kerslake, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Really nice to have you as well. All right, thank you, guys. Now, the Polish Prime Minister says that his government will ask Berlin for permission to send its German-built Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Germany is under pressure from Ukraine and other Western allies to give the green light, which is necessary for the tanks to be deployed. Well, I'm pleased to say that I'm joined now by Lucas Jasina, a spokesperson for Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who's joining us from Warsaw. Lucas, thank you very much for being with us this morning, and good morning to you. All right, so first of all, where are we with the tanks here? There has been reports that the Polish government may well go it alone with a coalition of some willing countries and send their Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, despite Germany saying no.
Sunday evening, situation changed a little bit because Bundesminister for Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock, declared in Paris during television interview that she will not protest against such gift for the Ukrainians. Polish Prime Minister and Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs are open to ask Germans again for confirmation on this, but we are still waiting for wider declaration from Chancellor Scholz. He's mostly the one who opposed against that gift to Ukraine in last few days.
Now, Lucas, there have been some reports this morning saying that if there's already been an agreement on a number of tanks to be supplied if Germany gives consent with some countries. Poland's involved in a coalition of countries. Can you confirm that and confirm the number of tanks and the countries involved in that coalition that's trying to push this forward?
Let's be a diplomat. I will wait with this confirmation until there will be official communique, but there is a coalition. There are countries who are ready to do that. I'm in one of them. You are in this one of them because United Kingdom is the country who will be probably one of the best and one of the most important participants of that coalition. But let's wait. There were too many declarations in the last few days to say numbers and to say who is exactly in.
Yeah, we know how many tanks are being requested by Volodymyr Zelensky. He wants some 300 main battle tanks. And I guess the benefit of sending Leopards from Poland is it's right there. And obviously Poland is obviously, at the moment, a key ally in terms of training, in helping to renew and renovate and work on any military personnel and equipment that needs to be fixed. So it'd be very convenient if those Polish tanks were sent.
Yes, and we're also very much happy how Britain participates in it and how Britain supports us also in training and also in making some important issues for Ukrainians here in Poland.
And Lucas, finally, just a thought from you on why you think there is this hesitancy out of Germany. Obviously, that country has a history that the current leadership are very respectful of. And I do wonder, is there a sense that Germany's trying to make sure that it's preparing its military, building up its military, because we know that it's had underinvestment, before it decides that it's going to send any of its tanks abroad?
Maybe that, maybe some political issues like trying not to avoid Russia too much, maybe some rivalry inside European Union, maybe some fears in Germany about military involvement in Eastern Europe, which has not very good historical record. That's for Germans to know, but we are still waiting for Germans to improve their leadership in Europe, the leadership they declare, and it's no room for improvement without helping Ukrainians with arms and facilities like that.
OK, Lucas Justine, we'll have to leave it there. Spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Poland. Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Hello there and welcome back. Now, the Archbishops of Canterbury and York have released their joint Reimagining Care Commission reports today in the hopes of changing our approach to care and support. It outlines 3 key actions: rethink attitudes, rebalance roles and responsibilities and redesign for the social care system. Well, joining us now is Dr Anna Dixon, Chair of the Archbishops Commission and who helped write this report. Dr Dixon, thank you so much for being with us. So we've laid out some of it there. Just talk to us why you decided that this report was important and what you want to see happen.
Well, the Archbishops commissioned this report because I think they felt that this was an issue that was being neglected, that over so many years people have promised, politicians have promised to fix social care and nothing had happened. And so many people we see who need care and support, whether they're adults living with disability or older people, are just not getting care and support to live a good life. And that's really what we're saying, that we need to rethink radically our whole approach to care and support.
What does that mean, rethink radically?
Well, at the moment, we tend to see this as a service that's done to other people, to vulnerable people, needy people. But the reality is it affects all of us in one way or another, either because we're caring for a loved one or relative, or because at some point in our lives, as more of us are living longer, we will need care. And so we think it's important we see care and support as something that's universal, that affects all of us.
Now, is it a case of money? There always seems to be that there's never enough funding.
Well, previous reports have started with that question of money, and they've got stuck on money, and we've never moved on. So this report was really starting from a totally different starting point. It was about values, about love, about trust, and about reimagining what do we actually want for ourselves and our loved ones in terms of care and support. So we haven't actually put a number on our proposals, but we recognise that the costs are falling somewhere. We're all paying for this at the moment. We're either paying in the burden of care that we give as family members, we're paying as self-funders, people having to sell their own homes. So we are recognising that, yes, we are going to have to spend more on this, but we should do that together in a fairer way. I mean, the report is just out. I wonder what kind of reception you think you're going to get from those who make these kind of decisions. And you should put a figure on it, because they respond to numbers, don't they, sometimes? Well, we have been talking to government, but this isn't just about government. We're proposing a national care covenant, recognising that we have mutual responsibilities. It's about all of us playing our part, national and local government, yes, but also the voluntary and community sector, church and faith communities, and as families and individuals as well. And the focus is on England, if I'm right? It is, yes. Is there any sense of sort of the way that we and people who live here see the sort of the generational change, the shift, the way that we sort of deal with older people in this country that needs to be rethought about? Yes, so I think underpinning our attitude to care and support, unfortunately, is a bit of a negative view of old age and indeed of disability. And so we are calling that out. We're challenging both the church but also wider society to be more inclusive and tackle discrimination on the basis of both age and disability. I know you don't want this to be about the politics of it, but the church does get criticised sometimes for getting involved in politics. And if this is about money, it will become an inherently political decision. Is there a concern about sort of getting involved in this kind of policy area? The church is already involved in care and support. So out there across the country, communities are supporting people to live well with disability, holding memory cafes. We visited all sorts of projects where people are being supported in the community. And I think we see firsthand in the church the lack of care and support, the lack of support for family carers. And it's a moral issue. And so I think we want to see the archbishops showing moral leadership on this issue as they are doing today. Do you think that they still have that position of moral leadership as, you know, church numbers decline and people perhaps don't identify as religious anymore? I think these moral and human issues are so important, and it's really great that the archbishops are speaking out on this issue of care and support, which for too long has been neglected, and there's been too little action. You mentioned about sort of other countries. They have moved ahead of us and England has got left behind. So Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland are all reforming. We look across to countries like Germany. They brought in changes to social care back in the 1990s. This is long overdue. What does that look like then? Because just describe, because as you say, when we talk about social care, we think about old people and people with disabilities and how you might need it. But it's often difficult if you live in this country to see what it could be like. What could it be like for us? Well, I think it could be that we, get access to care and support without a fight. At the moment, we heard too many people saying it's just too difficult. Too many people who need care and support, adults with disability, are left with nothing, and they end up, only getting the very basic support of washing, eating, dressing. That's not a good life. We're arguing that we need care and support that enables all of us to live a good and full life. Now, you'll know that when he was Chancellor, the current Prime Minister had an idea to try and fix social care, or at least give more money towards it. It was the raise in national insurance tax. That fell away during the leadership machinations of the Conservative Party. Do you want to see the government bring that tax back for that funding? What we're saying today is that we definitely need investment in social care, both in the short term, but in order to deliver this vision over perhaps 10 years, we will all need to take a collective responsibility and pay perhaps more in taxation. OK, so you do accept that we all may have to pay more tax to make sure we fund this properly? Yes, indeed. Do you think people are going to be happy with that? Well, that's why we need to have this debate and actually help people to understand what is care and support, why does it matter, and what do we want for our loved ones and families. And if we can get that across to recognise this is about helping us live a good life, to do the things we enjoy with the people that we love, then I hope that people will see that as something that they will want to. And we're wasting lots of money, frankly, at the moment on things like inefficient care. Well, it's an investment in ours and everyone's futures, isn't it? All right, Dr. Dixon, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for being
with us. Now, throughout the week here on Sky News, we're focusing on the future of the NHS, and we're holding a special debate this Thursday on the health service, and we want you to be involved. You can scan the QR code that you see on your screen. That's going to bring up an email form for you to be able to apply to be part of the audience at the University Hospital Coventry, where we'll be holding our debate. We're asking the question, can the NHS survive? You can also apply by emailing nhscrisis@sky.uk. The debate is going to be broadcast this Thursday, as I said, at 7 p.m. here on Sky News. And at 2 on Thursday, Sarah Jen Mee is going to be hosting a live phone-in show called NHS Your Say. Now, we want to hear your experiences of the health service, be them good or bad, whether it's getting an appointment with your GP, waiting for an ambulance or surgery, or visiting A&E. Call us now on 0208 167 2200 and leave us a message to book your slot.